Okay, guys, welcome back to Tea and Stuff. I'm joined here by my buddy Scott, my downstate New York buddy Scott. I always say your name wrong, like your Instagram name. How would you say your Instagram name?
It's cute Chajin. It's cute tea person in Japanese, I guess.
Every time I try to say it out loud, it just comes out horribly wrong. So Scott works good for me. Typically, sometimes it's the other way around. Like I'll be so used to people's Instagram name that I have a hard time saying their actual first name. But I think I've known you for long enough where we're on first name basis.
We're on first name, no longer IG handle names at this point.
So how are things going with you, man? There's the obvious pandemic still going on, and that's a bit of a headache. What's this wave like in the city?
Truth be told, I'm not in the city. As downstate as I am compared to you, I'm upstate for folks in New York City. I live in the Hudson Valley, close to Beacon, if you know that area. And
dude, that's so much better than living in the city.
It's its own thing. The city is a mess. I've been there on few scant occasions during the pandemic. I lived there during the first big wave, and then my then girlfriend, now wife at the time, she and I were just like, this is not necessarily sustainable for us. Both of us had been wanting to move out, and this gave us a chance, as it gave a lot of people a chance to move out of the city. And of course, you can't help from wherever you end up going to some degree, changing the communities in which you're around, and vice versa. So, we see that up here as we saw it in the city, and I'm sure you're seeing that, throughout much of the United States right now. But it's crazy, yeah. But I work from home, have been working from home for several years now, even before the pandemic. And at the very least, it just means I'm no longer doing my weekly meditation sessions in the city and having tea with folks, right? More of the hermit life up here.
Yeah, that was one thing that God I love to follow was to see your meetups in NYC in the park.
Yeah.
Like, just what a nice, just like I like to do it. Open invitation. I'm gonna be here pouring tea. So if that so interests you, then show up.
Yeah.
And I saw it a couple of them. I think it even grew to a point where there were other people brewing. Right? It wasn't just you, it was a collective.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was people, serendipitously wanting to get together or it being planned, but there have been some pretty notable outgrowths from both the stuff that, I may have been initiating at the time, but also, there are a lot more active tea people in New York City who want to get out there and meet people. And New York City, we have our tea and culture group. There's 7S Arts, which is down in Chinatown in Manhattan, and then there's New York Tea Society, which is a fantastic group as well. So I was always just kind of making tea in the park or making tea at Floating Mountain when I was still living there. So yeah, a lot of that. So.
Yeah. So are you, how itchy are you to do that again? Or has your new environment reshaped that? I mean,
it's such a mix. I think call it laziness or just call it wanting to maybe have a more focused approach, but I love having one or two people over for tea. I'm sitting here drinking or starting to drink some Korean tea, and I'm reminded of poem that's probably from some Ming period text, but comes to us from a Korean poet, tea person of the 1700s, I believe. He says, you know, drinking tea alone is like having tea with the gods. Drinking tea with 2 or 3 people is ideal. Um,
Yeah.
4 or 6 is just ordinary, and then you know anything above like 7 or 8 is a service. So it's, you know, having that one-on-one approach to tea. I think you can make deeper connections, of course, but certainly too, you know, I've been studying things like China Yu now for close to 20 years.
Yeah.
I want to share it to the point where it's like, here, have a bowl of tea I've made for you, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of opportunity for people who have not been exposed to that, or who may have deep exposure in other areas of tea, to learn different approaches. So that's what I'm itching for. I'm itching for something where, you know, you can kind of be shacked up in a small tea hut, and not worry about infection, not worry about, you know, this big thing known as the pandemic. Maybe we'll never get there, who knows? But it's, you know, it's one of those things that calls to me.
It's hard. People up here, so like in upstate, we're so spread out
Mm-hmm.
that I mean, it's been semi-normal here for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
but the one thing that hasn't really returned, and understandably, are like events.
Yeah.
And so technically right now, I could hold an event. There
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
there is a New York State Health Department approved way to do it
Yeah.
safely.
Yeah.
But it it makes the whole atmosphere different
Mm-hmm.
with all of those precautions in place.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people, even though they're not like completely terrified of everything,
Yeah.
they going to like a food type event, it just they're, you know, the either the angel or devil on their shoulder just continuously is like, is it a good idea?
Yeah.
And you know, enough times of asking yourself that, one of the times you'll go, yeah, I guess maybe I don't have to go. So you
Yeah.
choose not to. So it's not that people aren't interested or that they're like necessarily terrified, but it's just, I don't think people are at large or ready to do events like that.
It's, you know, if we're just riffing in terms of this conversation, I think it kind of goes back to this idea of thresholds and barriers to entry, right? I think tea has a lot to do with traversing thresholds and maybe removing barriers of entry. I don't know. You know, I don't want to promote gatekeeping in any sort of way, but I think whenever you step into a different culture space, a different meditative space, or a different practice space, however you want to define that, if you sense that there is something that keeps you at bay from that, and in this case we have a pandemic, or we have, you know, city or state or federal ordinances that might keep you away from that, you may not want to cross into that space. And
Yeah.
you know, it may also just be different conceptions of what that space might be, assumptions of what that space might be, that keeps you from that as well. But I think it is one of the difficulties right now facing the tea community is, you know, how do we create a space that is safe, not just on sort of a emotional level, but also, you know, how do we do it in regards to the sort of corporeal self, the body, and multiple people, the body sort of community, in that we can share something that historically has always been about, you know, how do we make a personal in-person connection, and remove some of those thresholds, or reduce some of those thresholds of entering. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a constant thing that you can't help but talk about, because talking about it, it's not like I always feel like whenever I start talking about the pandemic that I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about the pandemic, so get away from it. But it's, there's a lot of aspects you shouldn't necessarily escape, because maybe you're not like situated with it yet. Like we're
Yeah.
sitting here and I've been talking about this in respect to these problems that other people are facing. But
Yeah.
something I just realized yesterday on my about myself was I had an in-person business meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and one-on-one guy I'm comfortable with, so it wasn't like nervous jitters of someone I haven't talked to before.
Yeah.
I realized that I've grown to be uncomfortable in an
Mm-hmm.
in-person meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That over this I've gotten so comfortable that it's with anybody I can talk to you like my friend. But if you put me, I found yesterday, if you put me alone in a room with someone, I have a bit of uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
Like, so it was something that I sort of, a little epiphany I had that was like, wow. So
Yeah.
there's something I had identified that I got to work on, because, that's a big part of what, I do. And going forward, hoping that we can start getting events and stuff like that going back up, I need that.
Yeah.
So if I'm not comfortable, so I'm kind of glad that I became aware of it at this point rather than down the road,
Yeah.
because now it's something I can start working on. But
Yeah.
for so long, I always prefaced as things that other people had to do. But funny enough, there were a lot of the times I was really kind of speaking to myself.
Yeah. No. Great observation.
So, have you had any really interesting teas lately? I think last year was a pretty stellar year. I mean, from our producers or just tea in general, I
Yeah.
tasted last year, I was pretty happy with.
Yeah. You know, part of this whole experiment of trying to adapt to a world in slight lockdown, if not more intense lockdown, is part of it is dipping back into my own collection, which I sometimes didn't realize was so big and at this point so old. So part of this experiment has been going through teas that I haven't touched in maybe 10, 15 years. Like a yellow tea from like 1999 that was not supposed to be aged, you know, opening that up and trying it and finding that it was phenomenal. This Korean tea that I have right now is probably one of the best lifelines in terms of fresh tea that I've had so far, which is coming to me by way of a friend in Seoul who gets her tea from Jiri-san. It's semi-wild, and
what
if
what
we're
tea is it? If
it's
you don't mind.
it's a jakseo from Jiri-san, from the Hwage Valley region of the southern part of South Korea, in Hadong-gu, which is Hadong province. Tea's been cultivated there since the mid 600s, so it's kind of the original touch point for leaf tea in Korea. There are some like maybe pseudo historical first teas in Korea, but this is kind of the first that still survives to this day. So it's fantastic. This has a little bit of age on it now, which, in terms of green tea is more significant. This is picked last year, and it's still a beautiful color. I just, wetted the leaves and did the first steeping right now, and like this entire space now smells like this tea. And it's just, really, really beautiful green tea with a big flavor. So,
That's
uh,
so good. That's so good to hear, because there were a lot of people that during the pandemic, when they found themselves at home and, oh, I have all this time to drink tea now, they just went crazy buying tea.
yeah,
And, although I do appreciate the business, at the same time, I do sometimes worry and think about people that just, are just buying, but
yeah.
they forget to work through
Mm-hmm.
the stuff they buy. And then it is a shame when you have a bunch of tea that you do, you just don't drink right away. So you put it away, and all of a sudden you realize you have this huge collection of, good tea that you
Yeah,
really should drink.
yeah,
So a lot of people that I talked to did the same as you, and they took this as a awesome opportunity to just drag that giant plastic bin out and dig through it
yeah,
and see what treasures there are.
yeah, yeah. No, there's literally nothing like an aged tea, and you can say that about new teas too. So I'm not gonna exclude them, but you know, I had this, or I have this aged shui xian, which, you know, in truth, I'm drinking more than I probably should, because, you know, with aged tea, as with all tea, you have a finite amount. It disappears and it never comes back. At least that iteration of it. And, you know, you'll see it in my blog sometimes, it'll pop up because it's one of these teas that's very arresting in flavor. And I was sitting down with a relatively new tea friend whom I made up here, who I met through a Korean Buddhist group up in the Catskills. And she came over, we were having this tea, and, you know, it's always fun to share a tea that you kind of know and kind of have cataloged in your mind for a number of years. I've had this tea since maybe the late 2000s, and it's been around since the mid 80s. And she said to me, Scott, this tea is like medicine. And, you know, we have this trope of tea being medicine, and having some sort of flavor qualities of medicine, but, you know, kind of, I could see where she was coming from. It had that sort of dried fruit and dried root that, you know, you get. And it's, you know, it's surprising because this is something that I was taking for granted, but then two, you know, in these brief moments that maybe some of us are having as we're trying to adjust to this new world we're living in right now, you know, when we do make that connection, I think it's also important to, like, kind of bring out really fantastic teas and share it with people. It's you know, kind of like, not to be doomsday, but it's like the end of days, and it's just like we have these very, very brief moments where we can actually make these beautiful, poignant connections with people who are themselves tea people, right? So I think at the same time, you know, as much as I like dipping back into my old stash of tea or finding new beautiful teas, I think it also brings us to that moment where we realize, when we do connect with people, how important it is, you know, not to take that for granted. In some instances, yes, it might be a life and death sort of thing. It might be, this might literally be the last time that I see this person. Hopefully it's not that, but there is a quality in older tea practices, and older practices in general, where, like, this moment really is this moment. There's no repeating it, and there literally might not be another opportunity for it. So,
well, a lot of people right now are like, they want to help. They want to really make a positive, they want to make a positive impact on themselves and people around them. And they're always asking themselves, you know, well, what can I do? What can I do? I've been telling people, if you're a tea person, you have a great weapon in your arsenal. Just share. Just share it. Take something, just a tea that you're, like you said, a tea that you know really well, that you could drink any day and you could talk about it for hours on end. Take that and just share that experience with someone.
Yeah, for sure.
It's well, again, with COVID, it's tough, but I mean, if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. And believe me, this isn't the first pandemic that humanity has been through.
No,
certainly won't be the last.
no.
So,
I almost passed away years ago when I got swine flu.
oh Lord. Wow.
And after having such an extreme brush with death, I became fascinated with what almost killed me. Like, I wanted to learn about how a flu works, how it spreads, how it can spread, and funny enough, a lot of that gave me a good amount of context to deal with a lot of the stuff that arose that a lot of people never had to think about when COVID arose. So, I mean, I still didn't know exactly what to expect, but because I knew certain preparations and I knew when certain things like shutdowns were going to start to take effect. It gave me a little bit of a, and also us being in contact with people in China. Like I was talking to people in China about how serious things were getting
Yeah.
before the alarms even
Okay.
blew here.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I was telling people like uh I was talking to some people that like in China where when it got really bad that they shut down everything, like even grocery stores and people because they had no access to food, some people actually started to kind of starve
Yeah.
in their houses.
Mm.
And this was before the alarm was raised. I mean, we knew about this virus in China, but
Yeah.
no one was paying attention because nobody ever thought that it would break the threshold of the borders of countries. But once it did, I sort of took notice and went, okay. I was like, all right, so start in the back of your brain, just start thinking about what if type situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I give a lot of I lived for a little while in New York City and I'm very familiar with it and what it's like to live there and exactly how many people in a given day you share air with. And uh, when everything started to break, especially in New York City,
Yeah.
uh, that's why, like you said, that you guys were looking to get out of the city and this was your final push. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how big of an influx we had here of people moving upstate
Absolutely.
that saw, like, just like us, they saw stuff happening ahead
Yeah.
of time and jumped on it.
Mm. Yeah.
So it was, I mean, we got our first case from a New York City student that's parents rushed the kid home.
Yeah. Thanks,
So
New York. Thanks, New York City.
yeah, yeah. So it was very scary, and I was very scared for friends that were in New
Yeah.
York City.
Absolutely.
Um, and
Mm.
I'm very fortunate in that I didn't lose many people that I even know of at all.
Yeah.
Um, and I know a lot of people aren't quite as lucky, but I'm very, very, very thankful for that.
Yeah. It's really tough. Um, but again, it brings to a fore the importance of treasuring moments with people, treasuring those things that we have. It's Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'm sure he's not the only one who said this before, but and it's a tea reference. I'll use my tea reference library in my mind. He says, treat the bowl as if it's already broken, right? Imagine the bowl already broken, and the idea being that let's put it in the context of tea. I'm holding. Let's bring out which bowl do I want to use? We use this bowl. It's a nice mashiko.
Oh.
You It's a meditation, it's a visualization and a meditation. Most meditations refer to, whether we believe it or not, in a sort of object world, right? We have sort of
Mhm.
object and object mind, or mind object. And the idea is that find something that you treasure, in this case a tea bowl, and imagine this as you're holding it as something that's already broken, already past, right? So how would you interact with that object that you treasure if you believe it to be already broken? Something that is impermanent, right? Something that at any moment could disappear from this world. How would you relate to it at that point? Would you hold it more gently? Would you take each moment and sort of cherish it a little bit more? And the meditation is that, one, you're recognizing the impermanence of things,
Mhm.
but then at the same time you treat things with a sort of more grace and a little bit more gravitas, and not for oh, it's the most important bowl, but it is something that will, like myself and like yourself, will pass. um, and so I think, again, these challenges give us an opportunity to reshape our practice if that's what we're doing with tea, right? And there are a lot of people who have kind of thought this through before us, and I think we
Mhm.
can certainly leverage and certainly learn from those individuals as they've kind of figured it out themselves too.
What a really, really, I hope people that watch this, I mean, I would highly suggest doing what you just suggested, just holding a teapot or a tea bowl that you have
Yeah,
and truly think about it as if you were broken.
yeah,
You know, I hold the cup like this
yeah,
because it's whole,
yeah.
because I'm drinking out of it, because it's good. If this cup were to be very cracked, if it were to be, I mean, I would have the more support. I would be holding it less tightly with my fingers. There'd be more emotion I'd be
Mm,
pouring out towards that object. And that's what a wild difference from holding this cup just like this
yeah,
and then holding the cup if it were broken.
yeah, yeah.
I think that's a meditation too, that for somebody who like it has trouble getting into meditations, I
Mm,
think that's one that would be pretty significant and easy, not easy, but very accomplishable by even not the
yeah,
expert meditation.
yeah. And hopefully, not that there's a goal in meditation, but hopefully it also, has the reflective quality of instilling this sense of, as you yourself walk through your daily life, that you um, recognize that this moment too is very quickly disappearing. And not to be greedy, not to grasp at each moment, but just to very gently recognize that, these things come and they go. And
Yeah.
at some point, we're, all going to have to let go of that. It's a beautiful process if you can be relaxed in it. So, um, so
It's one of the only things I truly, truly fear is death. That's
oh,
I don't have a million fears, but the
yeah.
thought of not existing is something that's very, very hard for me
you
to
you
sit
won't
with.
disappear, Jeffrey. That's the thing. Not saying that I don't believe in the kingdom of angels and whatnot, but you know
I'm with you, man.
it's like a cloud. You're like water. You disappear and you turn into something else. So maybe you'll be
I
worm food. So
my best way of dealing with that is
mm,
just goes along with what you just said, and it's just
mm,
making sure that my actions have
yeah,
just a little more purpose.
yeah,
That when I do something, it's not just for no reason. Like
yeah,
do things with an intention, and as long as you do that,
mm,
you'll be making more of an impact with whatever you're doing. And like you said, that making that type of impact is the thing that, if in no other context, makes you live on. So it still scares the shit out of me. I still don't
mm,
ever want it to happen.
yeah.
Part of me wants to be uploaded to the metaverse, but dude, I'm telling you, that's a wild concept. I'm not like a big nerd in it, but it's something that just kind of blows my mind. And the fact that it really can actually be possible, possibly possible, that we can take someone and put them in a digital form. My brain is so
Mm,
hard wrapping around
mm,
what that is. That's because I don't think that's necessarily what everyone thinks it is. I don't think it's a continuation of life.
mhm.
But then what is it?
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
very hypothetical, like out there thinking, but it's in the news so much of, oh, what are the when Neuralink happens, and
Mhm. Yeah.
there are scientists that apparently can record your dreams
Oh
and
yeah.
play them back to you.
Wow.
That's supposedly something that already exists.
Wow.
Uh,
Um, yeah, I mean this is the brave new world, right? That,
Do you
that
think it's something to be feared and avoided, or do you think it's something that it's good to explore?
um new and scary things are new and scary. And with everything that is either, you know, everything has the potential to be dangerous. Everything. And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be a doomsday speaker, but like,
Even tea.
I mean, we can talk about things as being addictive. We can talk about things as being hurtful to the body or hurtful to the world. You know, if we want to talk about tea, and I know we don't want to delve into the world of politics, but like tea, even in its state that I'm enjoying it right now, has a negative repercussion on the world in which I'm sitting in. This space that I'm sitting in was land that was not mine. This house is made of materials that may have come from, you know, non-sustainable sources. The tea itself has a carbon footprint as well as a sort of labor footprint of the people who are making it, and there may be some sort of disparity in that. So we can talk about anything as having a negative impact. Now, this specifically, this metaverse thing, you know, I think whenever we get into something new, we have the opportunity to kind of take it in any which way. And we saw that with the internet in the 90s and the early 2000s. And that is, you know, could this be something that would free information and you know, reduce the sort of containing forces that oppressive systems place upon communication? Concern that I have with the metaverse is that, you know, if we want to treat it as a serious thing, is that it's coming from the standpoint of a business. You know, it is coming to us as a packaged product, and so you have to be careful as you do that, because now you're sitting into something that is framed in the context of maybe who the person who initially created this is going to frame it as such. I can remember, you know, when I entered Facebook as the Facebook, and you know, was joining it as a college student because that was the only way that you could join it. And I was like, wow, this is fun. I can put pictures on this, and I can do this and that. And you know, now it's become this crazy thing. And you know, even me saying this right now might preclude me from getting a job at Facebook if I wanted a job at Facebook. Versus like, you know, I was never a user of it, but like MySpace was like this little slightly rinky-dink kind of thing where you had a band and you could put pictures and engage with people. And there was very little containing element to it. So, you know, whenever you enter a space, you do kind of have to read it, right? You have to see like, does this feel safe? Is this a space where I'm allowed to be myself? And is it coming to me with either no expectations, whatever that might be, and is it allowing me to be truly authentic for whatever that means, right? To who I am and who I want to be. And so that, I think, is the danger currently. But of course, I think too, you know, maybe it opens up the opportunity for people to create their own version of this if that's what they want to do. And maybe it is a way, at least in the interim, for us to find some sort of connection in this time where the physical connection is not so readily available. But we'll see. You know, until we figure out whether or not it is truly a dangerous thing, I would say play with it.
Yeah. That's how I
a game for the while. Yeah.
It was kind of so I was on MySpace because I was touring with bands and stuff, so I was very much part of that culture. And then I remember Facebook came out, but I wasn't going to school, so I couldn't get on Facebook, and so then I had to borrow someone's extra email so that I could get on Facebook. And at that time, Facebook was just a way for you to find your classmates, reconnect with their classmates, and then to see like what you just said, like what it's, look at it today. I mean, holy crap.
Yeah.
It's just, it's not even the same thing.
No.
It's just under the name of what it originally was. Um, I I loved Facebook when I started using it for business and realized, oh wait, there's some business utilization
Yeah.
here. Like, but that, like you said, that some opportunist saw that and went,
Mhm.
oh, oh, this is a good place for business.
Yeah.
Oh, then this is a good place for ads.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a good, we can data mine. Okay. All right. We can, and then Facebook looks at it and goes, well, hey, if you're going to be making money off me, I want some of that.
Yeah.
And now it's steamrolled into this like giant, huge thing it is now.
Yeah.
Um, dude, it's hard because I still see some value in
Mhm.
keeping around and checking in every now and then on Facebook, but it's a tough one. It's one that I think I should let go, but I don't know if I am fully ready yet to cut the cord.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting experiment too, not just looking at Facebook as like the creators of Facebook, but also as somebody who is involved in, you know, moderating Facebook communities. Like, you know, I won't claim myself as a founder, but I will claim myself as an early user of the Gongfu group, which
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, ballooned into a huge group, at least by T and Facebook standards. And just kind of seeing, you know, how the conversations on that are what they are. The community is what it is. And seeing what sort of engagement and what sort of interaction it engenders, both positive and negative, right?
Have
Um,
you? Are you? How do you about the negative? Because
yeah,
that's something that's been buzzing around a lot
okay.
about like whether it's Discord or whether it's Reddit or whether it's uh I have the understand, or at least it's my impression from people talking to me about this issue and just my own observations that it kind of seems like it's getting worse. But that's just my perspective. So I wonder from you how much there's always going to be trolls. There's always going to be people that want to be information gatekeepers. That's always going to exist. But how big do you think that problem is in the T online community?
Yeah, I think, you know, it was one of the reasons why for a long, long time, I didn't use the internet as a research tool for tea. Um, I had to go through what I like to call direct experience, which is either going to a tea farm to visit and learn and see how tea was produced, or to engage with people who have actually, you know, made tea, produced tea, um, and talk with people who seeded their knowledge in actually seeing what it was, right? Or, you know, to a similar extent, going by way of either academic writing, which is, you know, very vetted,
Mm-hmm.
and goes through a process of fact checking. But you know, I think at the same time too, it's kind of like this is the tiger that's been let out of the cage, and for better or for worse, it does free up the ability for people with real knowledge to um, put out what they're, you know, what they're knowledgeable about. And you know, I'm definitely guilty of tapping into those sources, certainly now more than ever. I just recently joined a group on Facebook that, you know, will identify who made your Yixing teapot. And for those of us who are not, you know, fully skilled in reading seal script, that's awesome. I love that. I have not read the entirety of the show Unytea. So I tip my hat to the folks who know how to read through seal script and therefore can link me to the exact name of the person who, you know, made my teapot in like the 70s or 80s. And that's, to me, is like a magic right now. But it also, you know, if we're getting into like internet trolls and stuff like that, and gatekeeping, you know, when I smell a whiff of that, you got to do a couple of things. You either call somebody in and say like, hey, you know what, you're gatekeeping, like, or you say like, that was nice of you to say, not really, like, what information do you actually have that we could share? You know, I've done that a number of times. Or
you're re-ident like maybe how they presented what they were trying to say. They just didn't say it in a way that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know, dude, that happens with me a lot. And that's what I always, whenever I'm talking about, you know, like let's say something happens and I'm sort of being like, guys, we need to all be on the same page. I always get this little like ding in the back of my head where I have to go, but guys, let me also say that I am like cast the first stone who hasn't sinned. You know what I mean? It's like, I am not perfect. And every now and then I'll say something in a live set, like someone will ask me a question and I'll answer back. And then I'll think about how I answered back after the live session. I'll go, you know what? I think you were a little rude. So I'll contact the person and say, hey, just so you know, I hope I didn't come off as being rude. Maybe I didn't choose the right words. And sometimes it's like oh no, I didn't think that. But sometimes it's like I really appreciate that because it did, you know, come off as hurtful when it really wasn't. So sometimes it's like, as much as I can examine other people's behavior, I think it's also uber important, like you do, is just to point out that none of us are perfect. But I think the message that both of us are putting out is that just keep striving for better. Like, you don't have to be perfect, just keep striving for better.
Yeah. And the internet and social media, in some regard, maybe not always, unless, you know, depending on how explicit people are, it's a little bit of a game of telephone, you know. He said, she said, or like, as you said, you just can't read tone into a text, you know. Like, my parents will sometimes hit the all caps button and it's slightly triggering for me, you know. But at the same time, it's like, if what your real intention is with tea or with anything is to make a connection with somebody, your practice then has to be a form of nonviolent communication, right? And if you practice nonviolent communication, you'll learn fairly quickly, you know, one, how you begin to interact with people, but also you might begin to pick up on how people interact with other people as well. And you'll begin to see a little bit more of the sort of either imbalances that are produced through discourse, or you may pick up on, you know, what is actually being said. You know, is there an assumption that's being made here? Is there a what do we want to call it, like a privilege and subjugation kind of dichotomy being developed?
Yeah.
And so you just have to kind of be wise to that as best as you can. And also recognize that, you know, again, going back to metaverse, going back to Facebook, like these are not pure forums. These are the product of a sort of creator that may in fact not have your best interests in mind. They may actually want to be data mining you. They may want to actually, you know, kick up a comment so that it sits there and you know, drives a conversation and maybe drives a political force towards one way or the other. It's funny and crazy that this is where we are right now, but you know, this is something that you have to be mindful of. And it is one of the major forces that, like, you know, maybe like what you have mentioned yourself, like kind of pushes me away from these platforms, and really makes me want to have tea with people in person, or people, even in a virtual setting like this, but to forego that third party sort of link, right?
That's sort of like what this is. Like
Yeah,
this was me. I was very frustrated with Instagram.
yeah,
I'll never leave Instagram, but I was very, very frustrated and felt like I wasn't making an impact anymore,
yeah,
that I wasn't making the connections and showing people the connections that
yeah,
need to be shown. And so I said to myself, I said, what is the way that you can put your head together with these other people that I have great one-on-one conversations with
yeah,
under DMs or under private chat? And I'm like, people, this is what, in my opinion, what I saw was, I think this is the type of things that people do need to be seeing right now,
yeah.
is just seeing these one-on-one people just having very genuine conversation.
No, I love it. It kind of goes back to I don't know. I my new one of my New Year's resolutions is talk less, do more, right? Like
Yeah.
we can talk about the things that we want to do, or we can just do it. And the fact that you've been doing this almost every day for, I don't know how many years has it been,
Since they added the feature.
since they added the feature. It's phenomenal, and I think it also has hopefully encouraged other people, again, reducing that barrier of entry, or removing that threshold to entry, um, for other folks to do something similar, because that's the other thing. I think the more that we can move away from the sort of monolithic conversations that can sometimes either exist on forums or exist in sort of, the sort of zeitgeist mind, and get back to a model where each person is kind of their own, um, kind of has their own way, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
all we're doing is just kind of sharing that, and inviting people to see, and inviting ourselves to, or being invited to see how other people work within that. I think it has the effect of creating not just more diverse practices and more diverse conversations, but it also, for those who have been able to get a direct experience, it helps to promulgate that. It helps to share that, and dispel the sort of assumptions, or old ways of thinking that may, whether you know or not, be limiting you and your exposure to things that are quite fantastic. So I think it
I'd love
also, to remove middle people in sort of a extraneous sense, right? Like I can call a tea farmer right now, or I can like type in a tea farmer's name and go like, hey, I know it might suck for me getting this through customs, but I really would like to try your tea. Like, can we try to do that and negotiate a better, more equitable price for your tea, rather than going through, I don't know, something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Man, it's just been
sorry, I
a,
think I touched off. So I don't know what that.
no, no. I always have something to say, but
Mm,
it's not all, like you said, it's not always needed to be said.
yeah.
Like like I had something queued up, but it was like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Um, I wish that the only thing I wish I'd see more of were people having debate like conversations, that after the set debate is over, the two people can continue about having a good relationship, even if they are on two separate sides of a argument.
Yeah.
Like we all can feel the way we feel about things, but I wish that there was a little bit more of a common understanding that at the end of the day, after the argument, we're all still people that live on this
Yeah.
planet together.
Yeah. Um, make your enemies your best friends, and not for the creepy sort of keep your enemies closer kind of thing, but quote
What about,
unquote enemies, opponents, maybe we should be saying. I think the word enemy.
or just understand people
Yeah.
whose viewpoints are different than yours.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like
I,
I
I think there's an opportunity, again, I like to throw out challenge and opportunity in the same breath, but, um, I think we can see things that are at least perceived as oppositional as learning opportunities, to kind of see where that perspective might be coming from. And there's a lot of richness in delving with uh, discomfort and discomforting situations, so long as they're not within your, outside of your threshold of comfort, doesn't traumatize you or something like that, ideally. But um, I think that's the other thing that I think this tea community as a whole, and going back to your question about trolls and social media and XYZ, is um, Instagram is going to show you only really what it wants to show you, right?
yep.
And Facebook and YouTube and all of these different curated spaces, curated largely through an algorithm, these are going to share with you things that might be of like interest, and at the end of the day might be there to sell something. So they know that something that has already historically been proven to appeal to you or be of interest to you is going to somehow be a more sticky topic for you to, investigate further and potentially then result in a transaction of some sort. That's a world of comfort. That's the sort of Aldous Huxley Brave New World. This is
Yep.
the thing that will, enslave us in the future, or keep us subjugated in the future, is that we want to stick around things that make us feel at least more comfortable. And I'm speaking about this in the world of tea, which it itself is a world of comfort, right? At least for the person
Yeah.
sitting down making tea. So the discomfort, I think, if we want to define it as discomfort, might be, define where your boundary of knowledge is, or your boundary of experiences, and ask those famous questions. What do I know? I know. What do I know that I don't know? And what don't I know that I don't know? And if we can start playing a little bit more in that, what I don't know, I don't know. Part of that is engaging with people and having them flat out say to you, you don't know. Like, this isn't
Yep.
something that you're able to uh, recognized unless you have, either language skills or have been on the farm, or, have tried this out. So, sit down, shut up, and learn, right? I think that's, if we can all collectively kind of move maybe in the sort of, wow, I don't know, actually, even given all the resources that I believe that I have, I think it'll hopefully result in maybe a more interesting, I don't know, environment, and hopefully a more interesting conversation around a tea table. So virtual or real. So yeah.
I I appreciate all of the virtual stuff, and it needs to keep going and all that, but I can't wait to start seeing a little bit more of a balance of in person and online.
Yeah.
Like I long for the days when I'd scroll through my feed and I would see pictures of tea happiness and tea for me
Mm-hmm.
please all joining up and having tea together in the city, and like
Yeah.
these little groups getting together and doing these little outings. Like I'm very excited to start seeing those relationships again, because those are all things that make me really happy, because it's me seeing that all the work everybody in this community is doing, it's working.
Yeah.
And it
Totally.
just puts me in a really
Absolutely.
nice, really nice headspace.
Yeah.
Although we've talked about a lot of things that are, they're problems or stuff that's going on, but like I do hope that people see that we talk about those things because because we're dealing with them or we're on the other end of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I think, and again, I think going through this challenge, going through this situation, if we deal with it, if we actually engage with it, um, I think it will produce a better outcome, right? Rather than neglecting it, rather than ignoring it, rather than just trying to push through it and imagine that it's not happening or hasn't happened. Because I think, like you said, we're all in it, in some way, shape, or form. Some more than others, to the extent that there is a highly inequitable distribution of the pain and suffering that this has brought. But I think, again, in terms of tea, certainly looking forward to if and when this all gets figured out in a safe sort of way, but also very, very curious as to what it's producing as a result of it. And for folks in the tea community, I think it does give us the opportunity to break out of those sort of old forms and play with maybe some historical forms that we haven't necessarily touched. Maybe tip our hat to some of those in out of respect for the fact that for the last however years we've been living, we have been kind of living in a sort of safety bubble. We have been living, at least within the sort of American West, and we can get into the specific identities around that too, if you like. The bubble that tea has created and the privilege that we've experienced it through, historically was not always there. I think in terms of public health, people had shorter lives back in the day. People had, my grandmother would tell me, you wake up in the morning feeling fine, get sick in the around noon. In the afternoon, you'd be in bed, and then by night you'd be dead. And there's truth to that. And again, we can talk about this as sort of a meditation, but we can also be sitting in reality. And people dealt with that in different ways historically, and tea was affected by that for sure. Tea was, and traditionally speaking, still is a medicine. But even the way that it was presented certainly was a reflection of, how do we respond to our own impending mortality, right? Our own impending potential demise. And so we can remove that, but by incorporating that and using that as a sort of crux by which we can potentially pivot our practice upon, I think makes for a stronger practice. And I think allows us to kind of, exercise something that is maybe more in line with how the rest of the world lives and operates, given, that resources tend to flow in certain directions and to certain folks and away from certain folks. So
I'll tell you. So we're out of time, but I want to. On that note, though, I really want to thank you, because you should know that you're a person that I either go to, or when I see your posts, whether you mean to be meaningful or not, it always really resonates with me. Like, so you're a person that I've been very privileged to know for a couple of years now, and I've loved seeing what you've done, what you're doing, and excited to see wherever you do go from here. But just to let you know that, I'm sure it's not just me, but I'll speak for just me, that just you're a when I'm worried as if I'm maybe not being as humble as I should be, you're for some reason a north compass for me.
Uh,
So I very much thank you for being a part of the community, for being such a big, I think, such a big part of the community, and just for being the great type of tea person that if anyone ever has a question, you're very, very approachable and very wise.
uh,
Um, if people want to get a hold of you or they want to talk to you more, is there a way that you prefer to be contacted or?
the easiest way and probably most effective is if you find me on Instagram at cute chajin, and I think that's one word. I don't know if it's hyphenated or has a space in it. That's a very easy way. Just DM me on that.
Yeah.
I will most likely 100% respond to you, just because uh, it's really easy.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and if you want to make a connection beyond that after that initial DM, we can figure something out. I think again, when I was living it up in New York City and having my like regular tea events, it was very easy to sit down and have tea with me at this point. It is a rare occasion that I'll sit down with somebody and have tea, but I will, certainly treat you to
The
some.
door's not closed.
The door is not closed, no, and eventually it will become a very tiny door that you'll have to crawl through, and then hopefully you'll see a beautiful tea space in, because that's what I'm hopefully working towards making. But for those of you who know what I'm referring to, I think that's going to be the easiest way if you're on Instagram. If you're not, you'll find me on my blog, which is Scott T, all one word, SCOTTTEA. And that's a WordPress blog for what it's worth. So you can also drop me a little message there. So
Very nice. I'll put links in the description and all that good stuff. But again, thank you a million times. I wish you the best of luck. I wish you good health.
Thank you. Likewise.
And I'll do a last kind of cheers to you, and
No.
have a good day, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Yes. Cheers, Jeffrey, and cheers to all who watched and or listened. Lovely to connect with you.